What happens when one of Britain's most beloved acting legends walks onto a daytime talk show expecting a pleasant chat about his legendary career, only to be blindsided by a host who seems more interested in starting a war than conducting an interview? In just 40 seconds of television, a simple question about his past would spiral into one of the most shocking and hostile exchanges ever broadcast on live television, ending with Michael Caine storming off the set in disgust. The Loose Women studio was buzzing with its usual energy. The panel was ready. Denise Welch sat in the center, flanked by Kay Adams and Nadia Sawalha, with Janet Street Porter rounding out the group. The audience applauded as Michael Caine walked onto the set, waving politely, his signature charm on full display. He settled into the guest chair, adjusting his jacket with the ease of someone who had done 1,000 interviews before. "Michael, welcome to Loose Women," Denise began, her smile wide but her eyes sharp. "We are so thrilled to have you here." "Lovely to be here. Thank you for having me," Michael replied warmly. The first few minutes went smoothly enough. They discussed his latest project, a film he was promoting. Kay asked about his process, and Michael gave thoughtful, engaging answers. Nadia chimed in with a question about working with younger actors, and Michael responded with humor and grace. The audience laughed in all the right places. Everything seemed perfectly normal. Then Denise shifted in her seat, and something in her tone changed. "Michael, I want to ask you about something," she said, leaning forward. "You have had quite the career, spanning decades. But there have been some comments you have made over the years that, well, let's just say they have not aged particularly well." Michael's smile faltered slightly. "I'm sorry, what comments are you referring to?" "Oh, Denise continued, waving her hand dismissively. "Comments about women in the comments industry, comments about certain political issues. Do you ever look back and think, perhaps I should not have said those things?" The studio went quiet. Kay glanced at Denise, her expression uncertain. Nadia shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "I think everyone says things in their youth that they might reconsider later," Michael said carefully. "But I have always tried to be respectful and professional." "Have you, though?" Denise pressed, her voice taking on an edge. "Because I have done my research, Michael, and there are quite a few instances where your comments could be seen as, shall we say, problematic. I am not sure what you are getting at," Michael said, his voice remaining calm but his jaw tightening slightly. Janet Street Porter jumped in, trying to lighten the mood. "Denise, maybe we should focus on Michael's incredible body of work. I mean, the man is a legend." But Denise was not backing down. "I think it is important to hold people accountable, Janet, even legends." She turned back to Michael. "So, do you think you have always treated your female colleagues with the respect they deserve?" The question hung in the air like a bomb, waiting to explode. Michael stared at Denise for a long moment, and you could see the confusion turning to frustration on his face. "I have worked with some of the most talented women in this industry," he said, his voice firm. "And I have nothing but respect for every single one of them. I do not appreciate what you are insinuating." "I am not insinuating anything," Denise shot back. "I am asking a direct question. Have you always been respectful?" "Yes," Michael said flatly. "I have." "Really?" Denise raised her eyebrows. "Because I have heard stories." Kay tried to intervene again. "Denise, I think we should move on to something else." "No, Kay, I think this is important," Denise insisted. "Michael is sitting here, and I think he owes it to our audience to address these concerns." "What concerns?" Michael asked, his voice rising slightly. "You have not actually mentioned any specific concerns. You are just making vague accusations." "I am trying to have an honest conversation," Denise said, her tone dripping with condescension. "But if you are going to get defensive, then maybe that tells us something." The audience was dead silent now. Nadia looked mortified. Janet was shaking her head. Kay was staring at Denise as if she could not believe what was happening. "I am not being defensive," Michael said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "I am responding to baseless accusations on live television. If you have something specific to say, then say it. Otherwise, I think you owe me an apology." Denise laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound. "An apology? For asking you to be accountable? For ambushing me with this nonsense?" Michael corrected. "I came here to talk about my film, not to be put on trial for crimes I have not committed." "Nobody said you committed any crimes," Denise said, though her smirk suggested otherwise. "But I do think it is interesting that you are so quick to play the victim." "Play the victim?" Michael's voice was incredulous now. You have spent the last 5 minutes attacking my character without a single shred of evidence, and I am playing the victim? The tension was unbearable. Kay tried once more. Maybe we should take a quick break. No, Michael said sharply, standing up from his chair. I do not think we need a break. I think we need to end this interview. Denise looked genuinely shocked. You are leaving? Yes, I am leaving, Michael said, removing his microphone. Because I've been in this industry for over 60 years, and I've never been treated with such disrespect. You invited me here under false pretenses, and then you ambushed me with vague accusations designed to make me look bad. I will not sit here and let you do that. Michael, please, Nadia said, her voice pleading. I am sure Denise did not mean any harm. Did not mean any harm? Michael turned to look at her. She has been attacking me from the moment she started asking questions. And for what? For ratings? For clicks? I am sorry, but I have too much self-respect to participate in this circus. Denise stood up, her face flushed. You cannot just walk off the set. We are live. Watch me, Michael said simply. He turned and started walking toward the exit. The cameras followed him, capturing every step. The audience was stunned into silence. Kay and Nadia looked at each other helplessly. Janet sat back in her chair, arms crossed, looking furious. This is ridiculous, Denise called after him. You are being childish. Michael stopped and turned around one last time. Childish? You know what is childish? Inviting someone onto your show and then treating them like a criminal because you think it will make good television. I have been nothing but polite and professional, and you have repaid that with hostility and disrespect. So yes, I am leaving. And I suggest you take a long look at how you conduct interviews because this was disgraceful. With that, he walked off the set, leaving the Loose Women panel sitting in stunned silence. Denise opened her mouth to say something, but no words came out. Kay looked like she wanted to disappear. Nadia had tears in her eyes. Janet shook her head slowly, clearly disgusted by what had just transpired. The camera stayed on the panel for a few more seconds, capturing the aftermath of the disaster. Then, they cut to a commercial break. But the damage was already done. The interview had started as a routine promotional appearance. Michael Caine, a gentleman of the old school, had walked onto the set expecting a friendly chat about his latest film. Instead, he had been subjected to a hostile interrogation by a host who seemed determined to paint him as some kind of villain. And when he had finally had enough, when he had stood up for himself and refused to play along with her games, she had called him childish. Let's go back to how this all fell apart so quickly. When Michael first sat down, everything seemed normal. Denise asked him about his film, and he answered with his usual charm and wit. The audience was engaged, the other panelists were smiling, and there was no indication that anything was about to go wrong. But then, Denise made her first move. You have had quite the career, spanning decades. It sounded like a compliment, but there was something in her tone, something that suggested she was not actually praising him. She was setting him up. But there have been some comments you have made over the years that, well, let's just say they have not aged particularly well. There it was, the trap. She had not invited him on to talk about his film. She had invited him on to attack him. Michael had handled it as gracefully as possible. I think everyone says things in their youth that they might reconsider later. It was a perfectly reasonable response. He was not denying anything specific because Denise had not mentioned anything specific. He was simply acknowledging that people grow and change over time. But Denise was not interested in reasonable responses. She wanted confrontation. Have you, though? Because I have done my research, Michael, and there are quite a few instances where your comments could be seen as, shall we say, problematic. This was where the interview truly went off the rails. Denise claimed to have done research, claimed to have found problematic comments, but she refused to actually cite any of them. She was making vague accusations, hoping that Michael would either admit to something or get defensive. Either way, she would have her dramatic moment. Michael saw through it immediately. I am not sure what you are getting at. He was giving her a chance to clarify, to actually make a specific accusation so he could respond to it. But Denise would not take the bait. Instead, she doubled down. So, do you think you have always treated your female colleagues with the respect they deserve? It was a loaded question, designed to make him look bad no matter how he answered. If he said yes, she could accuse him of being arrogant or delusional. If he hesitated, she could claim he was admitting to wrongdoing. The other panelists could see what was happening. Janet tried to redirect the conversation. Kay suggested moving on to a different topic. Even Nadia, usually quiet during interviews, looked uncomfortable, but Denise was in full attack mode now. She was not going to let this go. I have worked with some of the most talented women in this industry, and I have nothing but respect for every single one of them. Michael's response was dignified and firm. He was not going to let Denise bully him into admitting to something he had not done. But Denise kept pushing. Really? Because I have heard stories. More vague accusations. More insinuations without evidence. She was trying to rattle him, trying to get him to lose his cool on camera. And that was when Michael realized what was happening. This was not an interview. This was an ambush. Denise had no interest in hearing about his film or his career. She wanted to create a viral moment, a dramatic confrontation that would get people talking. And she had decided that Michael Caine, with his decades of goodwill and public affection, was the perfect target. You have not actually mentioned any specific concerns. You were just making vague accusations. Michael called her out directly. He was not going to play her game anymore. Denise tried to frame it as him being defensive. If you are going to get defensive, then maybe that tells us something. It was a classic manipulation tactic. Turn the victim into the aggressor, make him look unreasonable for objecting to being attacked. But Michael was not having it. I am not being defensive. I am responding to baseless accusations on live television. He was staying calm, but his frustration was clear. He had done nothing wrong, and he was being treated like a criminal. The audience could feel it too. The energy in the studio had shifted completely. What had started as a friendly daytime talk show had turned into something ugly and uncomfortable. People were not laughing anymore. They were not clapping. They were just watching in shocked silence as one of Britain's most beloved actors was being torn apart by a host who seemed to have a personal vendetta. Kay tried to suggest a commercial break, sensing that things were spiraling out of control, but Michael knew that taking a break would not fix anything. Denise had already shown her true colors. She had already made it clear that she had no respect for him or his legacy, so he made the only decision he could. He stood up and removed his microphone. I think we need to end this interview. Denise actually looked shocked. She had pushed and pushed, thinking that Michael would just sit there and take it. She had underestimated him. She had assumed that his politeness and professionalism meant he would never stand up for himself. She was wrong. You are leaving? She could not believe it. Nobody walked off loose women. Nobody dared to challenge the host like this. But Michael was not nobody. He was a legend, a man who had earned every ounce of respect he had through decades of hard work and talent. And he was not going to let some daytime talk show host destroy his reputation for the sake of ratings. Because I have been in this industry for over 60 years, and I have never been treated with such disrespect. His words were measured and deliberate. He was not yelling or throwing a tantrum. He was simply stating a fact. This was unacceptable, and he was not going to tolerate it. Nadia tried to smooth things over, suggesting that Denise had not meant any harm. But Michael knew better. Everything Denise had done was intentional. Every question, every insinuation, every dismissive comment had been calculated to provoke him. She has been attacking me from the moment she started asking questions. And for what? For ratings? For clicks? He had figured out her game, and he was calling her out on it. When Denise tried to stop him, claiming he could not just walk off a live show, Michael gave her the perfect response. Watch me. 2 words that said everything. He was done with her games. He was done with her disrespect. He was leaving, and there was nothing she could do to stop him. As he walked toward the exit, Denise made one last desperate attempt to regain control of the situation. You are being childish. It was a pathetic insult, a last-ditch effort to make him look bad, but all it did was highlight her own pettiness. Michael's final words were devastating in their simplicity and truth. You know what is childish? Inviting someone onto your show and then treating them like a criminal because you think it will make good television. I have been nothing but polite and professional, and you have repaid that with hostility and disrespect. He had summed up the entire interview in just a few sentences. He had exposed Denise for what she really was, a host more interested in drama than in actual conversation, someone who would sacrifice a guest's dignity for a viral moment. The panel sat in stunned silence as Michael disappeared through the exit. Denise looked pale, clearly realizing that she had miscalculated badly. Kay looked mortified, probably already thinking about the fallout. Nadia had tears in her eyes, upset by the hostility she had just witnessed, and Janet, always outspoken, sat there shaking her head in disgust. The commercial break could not come fast enough. The cameras cut away, but everyone watching knew what they had just witnessed. This was not a celebrity meltdown. This was not an overreaction. This was a man with integrity, standing up to a bully who had gone too far. From the moment Denise asked her first loaded question, the interview was doomed. She had come prepared to attack, armed with vague accusations and a confrontational attitude. She had expected Michael to crumble, to apologize for things he had not done, to give her the dramatic moment she was looking for. Instead, he had exposed her tactics for what they were. He had remained calm and dignified while she became increasingly hostile. And when she pushed too far, when she crossed a line that could not be uncrossed, he made the choice to walk away with his dignity intact. That 40-second exchange, where Denise first launched into her accusations, had set the tone for everything that followed. It had been the moment where a routine interview transformed into an ambush, and it had been the beginning of the end for what should have been a pleasant conversation between a respected host and a legendary guest. But respect was the one thing Denise had failed to show. She had treated Michael Caine, a man who had given decades to the entertainment industry, who had brought joy to millions of people, as if he were just another target for her to take down. She had assumed that her position as host gave her the right to attack him without evidence, to make insinuations without proof. She had been wrong, and Michael Caine had made sure that everyone watching knew it. The silence that filled the studio after he left was deafening. It was the sound of a show imploding, of a host realizing she had gone too far, of panelists who wished they had done more to stop the train wreck they had all just witnessed. Michael walked off that set with his head held high, his reputation intact, and his dignity preserved. He had shown that being a gentleman does not mean being a pushover. It means knowing when to stand up for yourself and having the courage to do it, even when the cameras are rolling and the whole world is watching. Denise, on the other hand, was left sitting at that desk, surrounded by uncomfortable colleagues and a silent audience, forced to confront what she had just done. She had invited a legend onto her show and driven him away with her own hostility. She had tried to create a viral moment and succeeded, but not in the way she had hoped. Because the story people would remember was not about Michael Caine losing his temper or making a scene. It was about Michael Caine calmly and firmly standing up to someone who had treated him with contempt. It was about a man who knew his worth and refused to let anyone diminish it, not even on live television. The interview was over, but the impact would last much longer. Those few minutes of television had revealed everything you needed to know about the people involved. Michael Caine, gracious and professional until pushed beyond all reasonable limits. Denise Welch, aggressive and entitled, more interested in confrontation than conversation. And the rest of the Loose Women panel, caught in the middle of a disaster they had tried and failed to prevent. It only took 40 seconds for the interview to turn hostile. It took just a few more minutes for it to completely fall apart. But in that short span of time, everyone watching learned something important. They learned that even the most polite and professional people have limits. They learned that respect is not optional, even on a daytime talk show. And they learned that when someone treats you with contempt, sometimes the only dignified response is to walk away. Michael Caine did exactly that. He walked away from the hostility, away from the accusations, away from a host who had proven herself unworthy of interviewing him. And in doing so, he reminded everyone watching what true class looks like, not in staying and enduring abuse for the sake of publicity, but in knowing when enough is enough and having the self-respect to remove yourself from a toxic situation. The cameras cut to commercial, but the damage was done. The interview was over. Michael Caine was gone. And Loose Women would have to figure out how to move forward after one of the most disastrous guest appearances in the show's history. All because a host decided that attacking a legend would make for good television. All because Denise Welch forgot that respect is a two-way street. All because she thought Michael Caine would simply sit there and take whatever she threw at him. She had been wrong. Spectacularly, publicly, undeniably wrong, and everyone had seen it happen in real time. The way Denise had launched her attack showed careful planning. She had waited until Michael was comfortable, until the audience was warmed up, until everything seemed perfectly fine. Then she struck. It was calculated, it was deliberate, and it was meant to catch him off guard. You have had quite the career, spanning decades, but there have been some comments you have made over the years that, well, let's just say they have not aged particularly well. The setup was perfect from her perspective. Start with a compliment, then immediately pivot to an attack. Make it seem like you are just asking reasonable questions when really you are setting a trap. Michael had responded with grace. I think everyone says things in their youth that they might reconsider later, but I have always tried to be respectful and professional. He gave her an out. He gave her a chance to move on, but she did not take it. Have you, though? Because I've done my research, Michael, and there are quite a few instances where your comments could be seen as, shall we say, problematic. She doubled down. She escalated. She made it clear that this was not going to be a friendly conversation. The other panelists knew something was wrong. You could see it on their faces. Janet tried to intervene. Denise, maybe we should focus on Michael's incredible body of work. I mean, the man is a legend. She was trying to save the interview, trying to redirect to safer ground, but Denise shut her down. I think it is important to hold people accountable, Janet, even legends. She was not interested in saving the interview. She wanted the confrontation. She wanted the drama. And then came the question that really revealed her intentions. So, do you think you have always treated your female colleagues with the respect they deserve? It was not a question designed to elicit information. It was a question designed to trap him. No matter how he answered, she could twist it. Michael handled it perfectly. I have worked with some of the most talented women in this industry, and I have nothing but respect for every single one of them. I do not appreciate what you are insinuating. He defended himself without being defensive. He stated facts without being arrogant. He made it clear that he would not be bullied. But Denise kept pushing. I am not insinuating anything. I am asking a direct question. Have you always been respectful? She was gaslighting him now, pretending that her loaded questions were somehow innocent inquiries. Yes, I have. Michael's response was firm and final. He was not going to play her game. That should have been the end of it. Denise should have moved on, but she could not help herself. Really? Because I have heard stories. More insinuations, more vague accusations, more attempts to provoke him. Kay tried again. Denise, I think we should move on to something else. Even she could see that this was getting out of hand, but Denise was committed now. She had gone too far to back down. No, Kay, I think this is important. Michael is sitting here, and I think he owes it to our audience to address these concerns. She was framing it as if she were doing some kind of public service, as if she were holding him accountable for the good of society. But really, she was just being cruel. What concerns? Michael asked, his voice rising slightly. You have not actually mentioned any specific concerns. You are just making vague accusations. He called her bluff. He demanded specifics, and she had none to give. I am trying to have an honest conversation, but if you are going to get defensive, then maybe that tells us something. She was using classic manipulation tactics now. Accuse someone of being defensive when they defend themselves. Make them the problem when you are the one attacking them. I am not being defensive. I am responding to baseless accusations on live television. If you have something specific to say, then say it. Otherwise, I think you owe me an apology. Michael was done playing nice. He was calling her out directly. Denise laughed, actually laughed. An apology? For asking you to be accountable? She was mocking him now, treating his reasonable request as if it were absurd. For ambushing me with this nonsense. I came here to talk about my film, not to be put on trial for crimes I have not committed. Michael spelled it out for her. He made it crystal clear that he knew exactly what she was doing. Nobody said you committed any crimes, but I do think it is interesting that you are so quick to play the victim. She was still trying to turn it around on him, still trying to make him the bad guy. Play the victim? You have spent the last 5 minutes attacking my character without a single shred of evidence, and I'm playing the victim? Michael's incredulity was obvious. He could not believe what he was hearing. The tension in the studio was suffocating. Everyone could feel it. The audience sat in stunned silence. The other panelists looked mortified. And Denise just kept going, seemingly oblivious to the disaster she had created. Kay made one more attempt. Maybe we should take a quick break. It was a lifeline, a chance to reset, a chance to salvage something from this wreckage. But Michael was done. No, I do not think we need a break. I think we need to end this interview. He stood up. He removed his microphone. He made his decision. Denise looked shocked. For all her planning, for all her calculated provocations, she had not expected this. You are leaving? Yes, I am leaving. Because I have been in this industry for over 60 years, and I have never been treated with such disrespect. You invited me here under false pretenses, and then you ambushed me with vague accusations designed to make me look bad. I will not sit here and let you do that. Every word was measured. Every word was truthful. He was not being dramatic. He was simply stating the facts. Nadia tried one last time. Michael, please. I am sure Denise did not mean any harm. But even as she said it, she must have known it was not true. Denise had meant every bit of harm. That had been the whole point. Did not mean any harm. She has been attacking me from the moment she started asking questions. And for what? For ratings? For clicks? I am sorry, but I have too much self-respect to participate in this circus. Michael saw through all of it. He understood the game, and he refused to play. Denise stood up, her face flushed with anger or embarrassment, or both. You cannot just walk off the set. We are live. She was trying to assert control, trying to use the fact that they were broadcasting live as some kind of weapon. But Michael had the perfect response. Watch me. Simple, direct, powerful. He was not asking for permission. He was informing her of what was about to happen. As he walked toward the exit, Denise made one final, desperate attempt to regain some semblance of authority. This is ridiculous. You are being childish. It was weak. It was petty. And it backfired spectacularly. Michael stopped. He turned, and he delivered his final verdict. Childish? You know what is childish? Inviting someone onto your show and then treating them like a criminal because you think it will make good television. I have been nothing but polite and professional, and you have repaid that with hostility and disrespect. So yes, I am leaving. And I suggest you take a long look at how you conduct interviews, because this was disgraceful. With those words, he walked out. The cameras captured every moment. The panel sat in stunned silence. Denise looked like she had been slapped. Kay looked horrified. Nadia was crying. Janet was shaking her head in disgust. The commercial break could not save them. The damage was done. Everyone watching had seen exactly what happened. They had seen a host ambush, a guest. They had seen a legend stand up for himself. And they had seen dignity triumph over pettiness. Michael Caine walked off that set and never looked back. He had given Denise every chance to be reasonable. He had responded to her attacks with grace and composure. But when it became clear that she had no interest in anything other than creating drama, he made the only choice a person with self-respect could make. He left. And in leaving, he taught everyone watching an important lesson. You do not have to tolerate disrespect. Even when the cameras are on, you do not have to sit there and take abuse. Even when someone has a microphone and an audience, you are allowed to stand up. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to walk away. That is what Michael Caine did. And that is why, in the end, he was the one who came out of that interview with his dignity intact, while Denise Welch was left sitting at that desk, surrounded by the wreckage of what should have been a pleasant conversation with a living legend.